Have you set a revenue target for your business in 2026? And if you have you actually done the math to figure out what it takes to get there? Not just a gut feel or a rough estimate, the actual math. How many events do you need to serve? How many leads per week do you need? If you haven't done that yet, we're going to do it right now. Hey everyone, welcome to the Flash Quotes podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit different. It's a experiment. So this will be a solo episode, just a short deep dive on one idea. And heads up, it's going to be a pretty visual discussion. I've got some diagrams and a spreadsheet that I'm going to be sharing. So definitely this one is best consumed on YouTube or Spotify video, but I'll do my best for you guys on audio to explain as we go as clearly as I can. Also, all the diagrams that I share and the spreadsheet calculator that I share, we're going to make those all available to download for free. So if you look in the description for this episode, you should see a link to download that stuff, and that will help you take some action and use some of these tools that I'm going to show you to help do some financial planning for your business in 2026. So how do you get to 100K or whatever your goal is, right? So there's people of all different sizes, business sizes that are listening to this podcast, right? A lot of you're just getting started and maybe it's a side hustle and your goal is just to make your first $100,000 in a year. And for a lot of people, we hear that that's kind of your, it's the point where you feel like you could maybe quit your job and go all in on your mobile service business. So maybe your goal is 100K. That's awesome. I'm going to be using 100K as an example throughout this talk because it's a nice round number, but just bear in mind this. No matter if your goal is $1 million or more, whatever it is this year, you can still use these same frameworks to kind of get clear on how you're going to get there. Let's talk about calling this the 100K calendar. If you have a target number in mind, have you ever actually thought about what does that mean in terms of events? What does that mean in terms of workload? What does that mean in terms of how many leads you need? And what does that mean for your pricing? Because you can hit 100K a lot of different ways. So what does a 100K revenue year look like on a calendar in terms of how many events you need to do and how much you need to charge for each event? Well, there's many different paths you could take. Depending on how you price your service, you could have a pretty easy path to get to 100K or a pretty hard path. So I'm just going to illustrate that with a couple of examples here. Let's say your average event is $500. That's really on the low end of what we see. Super low, probably would, in general, we would consider you underpriced depending what you're doing if you're only charging $500 per event. But let's say that's your average event as an example. Well, how are you going to get to 100K? You need $100,000 divided by $500 per event. You need 200 events per year. So that's a lot of events. You're out 4 days a week doing events. You may not even be able to pull that or swing that if you have a job, but that's what you need. And so if you divide 200 by roughly 50 work weeks in the year, assuming you leave yourself 2 weeks for vacation or just slow times around the holidays, that means you need to do on average 4 events a week. So that's a ton. Your workload is going to be very, very high at that rate, right? You're going to feel burnt out and tired because that's a grind. That's a ton of events, but you're going to hit 100K that way. But maybe there's an easier way, and I'm here to tell you that there is. So just you can probably see where I'm going with this. But if you raise your average order value to $1,000 per event, all of a sudden you only need to do 100 events per year, and then you only need 2 events a week, and you'll hit the same goal. What about 1,500K divided by 1,500 would be 67 events per year. So a little over 1 a week. Let's call it like 1.3 a week or something. So it's getting a lot easier, right? This is feeling more manageable probably for you. And then if you get up to 2,000, which as a side note, if across all of the data that we have in Flash Quotes, the average of every booking that's ever been booked in our system is about 1,800. So I'll just make a little note here. 1,800 is the average. That maybe gives you a little bit of a benchmark of where you fall on that range. So yeah, this is what we see across every booking that's ever happened in Flash Quotes. But let's just say for easy math, you got your average order value up to $2,000 per event. Well, now you only need 50 events. And that means you basically only have to do 1 a week, and you can still take 2 weeks off. take a week of vacation, Christmas, go out of town. Don't have to worry if you get slow around the holidays, that's going to be really cush. So that in this world, your workload is way lower. You're chilling, right? Because only 50 events, that's pretty manageable. That's one a week. You could easily scale that up. You could easily handle more, especially if you bring on people, and you're still hitting your target of $100,000 of revenue this year. So, well, but Zach, I can't just raise my prices. Well, we'll talk about that. I'll show you some ideas. There's also some other levers you can pull besides just raising prices to get to this point. But the point of this is just to get you thinking, your revenue is an equation. And in the events business, it's an equation of how many events you're doing, what's your average event order value. And that is how you back into how many leads you need and all these other types of things. So think about it from this angle, do this math and think, where do I want to fall on the spectrum? Do I want to be lower ticket and book a ton of events? Or do I want to be higher ticket? And maybe some people say that, you're too expensive, but it's okay because I only need 50 to hit my goal and I have a really chill lifestyle. Same 100K, completely different life depending on where you fall on this range. So that was the point of what I was trying to illustrate here. Okay, so what are the levers that you can pull if you have a growth goal, like hitting 100K or hitting 500K or hitting $1 million of revenue this year? There's really only 3 things you can change, levers I'm calling them, that you can pull to hit your goal. If you have some baseline, you have some baseline booking rate, you have some baseline number of leads that you're getting every week, you have some baseline average order value or average invoice size for your bookings, there's only 3 things you can change to make your top line grow from where it was last year. And we'll talk through them here in the pros and cons of each of them. You can increase your close rate. So that means you get the same amount of leads, but you just book more of them. That's one way to boost your revenue. Another way is to increase lead volume. This is the one that most people jump to in their head, and a lot of people just assume this is the only way. It's actually not the only way, and it's probably the worst way of the 3, which we'll talk more about. And then the third one is increasing your average order value, your AOV, which is the average invoice across all of your invoices. What is that number? So you can change any of these 3 things, and it will have an impact on your top line revenue and grow it. So let's walk through some examples. Let's start with AOV because it's the easiest to change and it is relatively simple to understand. So if you get this, let's say you're getting some baseline number of leads, 100, 10 leads a week, and you currently your average order value is $1,000 per booking. What would happen if you increased that to $1,500 a booking? The impact on your revenue is pretty straightforward. It would just be you're gonna get the same number of leads, you're gonna book them at the same rate, but they're gonna be on average booking you for $500 more. So the impact would be a % top line revenue growth from your previous baseline because your average order value increased. That part of the equation went up, so you're gonna boost your revenue by 50% by increasing your prices 50%. This is not rocket science, but it is something that needs to be discussed because a lot of people that we talk to, their pricing is too low or their average order value is too low. And I want to talk about how you can boost your AOV because it's not just raising prices, although that is part of it. One is obviously try raising prices. Again, we've talked about this in a previous episode, evaluating if you have some room to increase your prices based on what your booking rate is, but that's the easy one. Another one is more add-ons. Are you leveraging the add-on functionality in Flashquotes? Are you thinking about ways that customers can pay you more for the same event? Oftentimes in the event industry, what we see, these things are like custom branding on the cart or custom logos on the cups or the napkins. It could be a special menu. It could be a special premium offerings or food or beverages that you offer that are more than usual. It could be any of those things or whatever else you can think of. Latte printer is a big one in coffee, printing custom logos on the drinks. But these are really important because the more add-ons you have and the more adopted they are across your customer base, you're going to naturally increase your AOV even if you don't raise the base service price. So that's an easy lever you can pull to boost your AOV, boost your top line. What about increasing your booking rate? This is something we talk a lot about because booking rate is kind of key to how we think about flash quotes. It's very visible on the dashboard, as you know. And most importantly, you don't need to get extra leads for this to boost your revenue. So if you're getting 10 leads a week, like we said, what if you could book more of them? So what if you're in this example, what if your booking rate right now is 16%, which is pretty low? That's kind of like a borderline bad, but I would say it's about average or slightly below average. Anything below like 15%, we would say you got a serious problem and we need to figure out what's wrong with your sales process. But let's say it's 16%, which is like mediocre. Okay, what if I got it up to 24%, which is excellent? Well, that would be an impact of, wait for it, also 50% increase in top line revenue. Why? Because going from 16 to 24%, half of 16 is 8. So 16 plus 8 is 24. Don't worry about the math. It's a 50% increase in your booking rate. Therefore, if you get the same 10 leads a week, you're going to be booking 2.4 of them instead of 1.6 of them. And that's going to equate to 50% more bookings and 50% more revenue, assuming your AOV is the same. If you increase your AOV, it will be more than 50% increase in revenue because you're getting more bookings and they're paying you more. This one is usually the highest ROI, especially if your booking rate is low, but there is diminishing returns. So once you get up past 25, 30%, there's not a lot of benefit in boosting your booking rate further than that. And actually, we've talked in previous episodes about how too high of a booking rate is actually a different problem. That means you're not charging enough or you're not getting enough lead volume. So how do you increase your close rate? This is all about sales process. So the big one is follow up. You will drastically increase your booking rate if you just stay on top of your leads. We recommend an average of 7 follow-up touches until they book you or until they say, please, please, please stop bugging me. So that means emails, texts, phone calls, touch every lead 7 times. If you can't do that, then that's, you need to be thinking about, how can I do that? Do I need to hire some help so that I have time to follow up my leads? Do I need a salesperson? Do I need to become the salesperson and hire someone to do everything else? Because you can't be just letting your leads fall through the cracks. The other thing is follow up fast. And that's the whole idea of flash quotes, right? Is we have data, we know that your booking rate is directly proportional to how fast you follow up. So if you follow up within 5 minutes, your booking rate is going to be pretty much at its maximum. And every hour that goes by after that, your booking rate is going to decline and decline and decline until, if you wait an hour to follow up with a lead to give them their initial quote, an hour, you've got a decent chance still. Like a day or two, you have very, very low chance, especially if they're comparison shopping, they're probably already booking someone else. So follow up and follow up fast. This should be like follow up often. And then multimodal communication is a big one we talk a lot about too. Multimodal. So don't just email them. Some people prefer text. Some people prefer phone call. I know you need to not think about what you prefer. You need to think about what your customer prefers. And usually if you try all 3 of those, you're going to find which one they like and respond to the best right away. And that's going to increase your chance of booking them. Okay, and then increased lead volume. This is the one that everyone thinks is so obvious, but it's actually it should be kind of like your last resort, to be honest, because the other 2 can have the same impact as we've shown, but they're easier to implement. It's mostly process changes. Increased lead volume is like not something you directly have control over, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But if your goal was increase events by 50% or have a top line impact of 50% revenue, like we did in the other examples, then if you had 100 leads a week, well, then you need to find 150 leads a week. And assuming that your close rate stays the same, and you're going to be serving more events per week, whereas in the AOV example, you're serving the same amount of events. So it's actually less work and more money. This is more work. So the impact would be plus 50% to your revenue, but you're serving more events, which is more work, and it's expensive, or it can be expensive, to get more leads, because the main ways that you do it are through paid ads, which cost money, obviously, through SEO, which you can learn yourself, but more likely than not, you're going to end up having to pay someone for that, through cold outbound, which again is time consuming. So and you're already probably doing some of these things. You're going to have to do more than what you're already doing. You're going to have to do 50% more, in fact, cold outbound. And if that's your primary channel, right? So at some point, there's diminishing returns here with how much time you have to be cold calling people, or how much time you have to invest in fixing the SEO of your website, although you should make it as good as you can, and that's something worth paying for, or how much money you have to spend on ads. So increased lead volume is a good way to grow, and it is the only way to grow if you've got your close rate optimal and you feel like you can't increase your average order value anymore. But most people can get a lot of bang for their buck focusing on the green and the orange rectangle here. So that's my big takeaway for you here. Most operators obsess over volume, getting more leads, but changing your price and improving your close rate is a higher leverage way to do the same thing, which increase your top line and hit your goal of 100K. All right. So let's talk about funnel math and how to set your goals. And then I'm going to jump into a spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you guys so you can figure out your numbers for yourself. But if your goal, well, let's talk about what makes a good goal. Let's say, again, your goal is 100K in annual revenue. I would actually argue that this is a bad goal. Why is it a bad goal? Well, because it's not directly actionable. It's a lagging indicator, right? So we talk sometimes in business about leading and lagging indicators. Lagging indicators means you only know if you hit the number at the very end and after all the other work happened and everything else went right? So a better goal is a actionable. So good goals are actionable and leading, as opposed to a revenue goal is more passive and lagging. So a good goal would be, instead of 100K revenue, it would be, what are the things that will lead to 100K revenue that I can actually act on? So these would be things like increase the things that we just talked about, increase AOV. You should make good goals are also quantifiable. So it shouldn't just be increase AOV. It should be increase AOV from X dollars to Y dollars, maybe 1,000 to 1,500. A good goal, I'll put that 1,000 to 1,500. Another good goal would be increase booking rate from 16% to 24%, like we talked about. And another good goal would be, I guess, you could set a goal around getting more leads. Again, it's just, are there better ways to achieve the same goal? So like increase weekly leads from 8 to 10. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. So I want to walk you through this funnel math, how to work backwards to a weekly lead target, because I think that is ultimately the most actionable thing you could take away from is, am I getting enough leads to hit my goal? So if your goal is 100K, and again, this could be any number, and I'll show you a calculator in a second to figure that out. Let's say your goal is 100K. You need to divide that number by your average order value. That tells you how many events you need. Then you need to divide that by your close rate or your booking rate in flash quotes, and that tells you how many qualified leads you need per year. Then you can divide that by 50 work weeks, and that tells you how many leads you need every week in order to hit your 100K goal with your current math. So let's pop over to a spreadsheet, and I'll kind of wrap this up with some concrete examples. All right. So again, if you want to download the spreadsheet, link will be in the description for this episode. But I'm calling this, what's your weekly number? And the idea is, what is the weekly number of leads that I need in order to hit my revenue goal for this year? So in this spreadsheet, this top part is your inputs. These are the numbers that you can play with to see what you need to do to hit your goal. So in this example right now, if my goal was $100,000 and my average order value was $1,500 and my booking rate was 16%, and I'm working 50 weeks a year, that means this will all auto-calculate, I need to do 67 events this year, which is a little over one a week. This is rounded a little bit too low. So 1.3 events a week, which means I need 417 leads this year, or 8 leads per week. So to hit my numbers, if those are my numbers, I need to make sure I'm getting 8 leads a week. And if I'm not doing that, I may need to get more leads, or I could fix one of the other two levers that we just talked about. So let's say, what if I fix my sales process and I started texting and calling people and started getting my quotes out within 5 minutes, which flash quotes, everyone who's using flash quotes should be able to do. If not, you just need some help getting your pricing set up, because the whole point of flash quotes is the quote is already ready to go. You look at it, you click send, it should be able to send a quote in 30 seconds. If you focus on those things, maybe you could get your close rate up to 25%. Wow. Okay. So everything else being the same, now you only need 5 leads a week because you're closing more of them. So that's, you could also use this to work backwards. If you say, I'm already getting 5 leads a week, what else needs to be true on that same lead volume for me to hit 100K? Maybe your close rate only gets up to 20%, but you could boost your average order value to $2,000 an event. And hey, look, you could still hit 100K with only 5 leads. So this is a way for you to play around with those different numbers and figure out, based on either how much lead volume you need to get or based on the lead volume you have, how can you hit your number without getting more leads, but just by improving your average order value and your close rate. Down here in the what if scenarios, kind of similar idea. So this is a scenario calculator for what happens if you increase your average order value. I'll drop this back down to 1,000, and then you can play around with, if I increase my AOV by 200 or 300 or 400, what does that mean for how many events I'm going to do a week and how many leads I need a week? What about higher close rate? You can play around with bumping up my close rate 5% or 2.5% or 7.5% and see how that affects how many events you're going to be doing and how many leads you need. And then down here, there's just a little cheat sheet that shows you kind of the impact of your average price, back kind of all the way back to the beginning of our discussion. How many events a week do you need to do to hit your goal based on your current average price? So you could pick any number in this grid. Let's say my goal is 100,000, or it's 200,000, or it's 225,000 this year. Great. All I have to do is serve 3 events a week at $1,500 an event. That is that's the path to hitting 225K. What if I want to do 400K this year? Well, you need to do 4 events a week at $2,000, or you could obviously do, more events a week at a lower price point. But that is just to get you thinking, what is the easiest lever to move in my business, and where do I want to be at the end of this year? Which one of these numbers is my goal, and how am I going to get there? Because like we talked about, you only have 3 levers. There's really only 3 different ways to grow your events business. Again, they are increase your average order value, get more leads, or close more leads. All right. So again, I will share those in the description below, both the diagram and the spreadsheet, so that you can use this information. Your homework is pick your revenue goal for 2026, divide that goal by your average order value to figure out how many events you need, divide that by your close rate to figure out how many leads you need, and then divide that by 50 to figure out how many leads you need per week. Now you're going to have a real number. And when someone asks, how's your business? You're going to say, you're not going to say like, oh, we're busy, or oh, we're slow. You'll be like, well, I'm averaging 6 leads a week and I need 10. That's clarity. Clarity is the first step to hitting your goal in your business. So the math isn't complicated. I mean, hopefully everything I just showed you is really obvious, right? It's not complicated. It's just that most people never do it. So this is me telling you, go do it. Go do it right now. Download the spreadsheet. It takes you probably 5 minutes to figure out what you need to do to hit your goal this year. But most people just never do it. They're stuck in a rut. They're thinking, I need more leads. How do I get more leads? When the real answer might be, I need to add more add-ons to get my average order value up, or I need to increase my close rate. Maybe I need to do better follow-up. So go to the link, download the diagram, figure out your numbers, and make 2026 the year that you actually know what you're shooting for. And one last thing, this format was an experiment solo episode with kind of one deep dive topic with some visuals. So let me know what you think. If you guys liked it, we might do more stuff like this in the future. Drop a comment and let me know if you thought it was helpful or not. Otherwise, we'll just be back with the regularly scheduled programming next week. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you next Friday. Thanks.